Here we go. So, hey girl. So, I know you, but tell the good people, who is Whitney? How would you describe her?
Woo, I'm gonna need some time. It is a complicated thing to, describe who I am, but like in the truest nature of it, I am the daughter of Mary Henderson, the daughter of Ken Jones. I am a very proud Afro-Indigenous woman. I claim all of it, all my birthright to this place, to this world, to this country, all of that. Our ancestors who had to cross the Atlantic Sea to, be here and, unwillingly. And so all of that, when I think about, who I am, I never want to discount any part of it because there's so many things that even when I think of my mannerisms, sometimes I'm just like that reminds me of, even people who I haven't met before. The connection between us as people is always so rich in, our cadence, the way that we talk, the things that we are interested in as a culture and as an ethnic group. And so, when I think of who I am as a person, it's an amalgamation of all of that. I wear it proudly, I speak it proudly, and I'm just, a human being, a spiritual human being in this flesh, but I'm on a very earthly journey and I'm still figuring out who I am. And I'm very comfortable with that and okay in continuing the pursuit to be intentional about figuring out who I am continuously.
It's the way you just set the atmosphere around this conversation. By that response, I was like, felt like warm tea just now, like, ooh, that felt good. And what I found so refreshing in your response is that you didn't attach it to an occupation or a title. Often when we ask that question, oh, well, I do this and I have this degree and I have this title. And I'm not knocking that because I know the fight it takes for us to acquire those things in a lot of spaces. I don't want to be dismissive towards that, but I love that you identify yourself as one, naming your elders, your parents, right? Like I'm a derivative of that. And even beyond just them, like I'm a derivative of my ancestors. And I love how you praise it like earthly journey. I'm like, I told you before we started this conversation, I'm stealing some gems, but yes. So let's just jump straight into it. When I looked at your Instagram, because I do a little bit of stalking, I saw your bio where, and I'm going to quote, you said, strengthening Black communities through education, real estate, and enterprise. So I was curious, like, what does that mean to you explicitly? Like, what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so this was so not intentional. But I thought about at one point, and I can't remember what point it was, but I said, you know what, Whitney? And this connects to what you were saying about us identifying ourselves through our work, that lens of like, again, white supremacy and everything that we do has to be merit-based and has to be aligned to, factors that aren't really as important to us as we think that they are. And so I thought about it, like, who is Whitney? I'm someone who really, really cares about the education of our people, the education of our communities. I truly believe that education is a great equalizer in so many ways. I think we've had so many proof points as people. Like, think about Frederick Douglass, who taught himself how to read. Think about all of the people who have come before us who have had fewer resources and still have found a way to use knowledge as a key function of our community and for empowerment. And so I want to do that. Like, I started this journey here. I knew my dog was going to cut up as soon as we started. Don't mind her. I knew she done turned an age up and she's turning up. She is too funny. But, I think about, again, going back to education as a great equalizer, every single win that we've had as a community has been empowered through this understanding of the knowledge that we possess, the knowledge that has been absent in our journey. And so when I started out as a teacher, I was really young. I was 20. I graduated college early. I started my career early as a teacher, and girl, I had the nerve to be teaching kids who were 16. So I was just 4 years older than them. And it really shaped my identity as a person because I said, I want to spend the rest of my life in this field. I want to show you how there's so much life and world out there with the right resources, you can engineer the type of experience you want in your life. I know that there are so many factors that play a role in us not being able to actualize ourselves in the best way possible. You know, there's the security needs. We talk about, what is it? Piaget's hierarchy of need, or Maslow's, I'm sorry, hierarchy of need, where the very basic is like, we got to have our basic security needs met, a home, food, security, love, things like that. And so there's so many barriers that I saw kids in their first year really struggle to fight and access. And I knew then that the only way that we will really work ourselves out of these holes is like really through thinking about, how do we use our it's education. How do we use our networks to get what we need out of life? How do we learn and read and write and respond and analyze to all of the stimulus around us to be able to make informed decisions about who we want to be? So that's the core of education. For enterprise, we're going to talk a lot about wealth. And I think that, you know, because we have so far to go, because we have started the race unfairly and like so far behind some of our, you know, non-PLC counterparts. And so we have to find a way to leverage wealth. And the way to leverage it, you know, there's one thing to have access to it, but to leverage it means like, I understand it fully, and now I can make it work for me. And I think that when people are starting on their wealth journey, oftentimes they think through like, okay, I got this lump sum of money. Like, what do I do with it? How do I continue it? You have to be very strategic, because as we know, the pandemic has taught us this. The recession taught us this in 2007. Inflation is teaching us this right now. Time changes. And as time changes, what seemed like a lot of money to you a few years ago is not the same amount or value that it is right now. And so because we're continuously, as you know, humanity responding to these things like the pandemic and the inflation that we're seeing right now. Girl, I went to the grocery store last night. I couldn't believe how much eggs were. Like, I'm just do it out, because I ain't get my D-SNAP. They, you know, they turned me down for, you know, the food stamps. I said, you know what, it's just gonna be what it is. But, you know, it's one of those things where we are constantly adapting to new policies, new things that are pushing us back. And so we have to use small business, and we have to see ourselves as businesses. Like, our brand, our personal like being is a business. You walk around this earth with a purpose, and you are constantly meant to promote it to, you know, whatever that is. And to do that and transfer that into wealth, and notice I didn't say money, to wealth, is so meaningful on this journey. And so small business is important to me. And then last but not least, real estate. I know I touched on this a little bit, but you know, that was part of my wealth journey, but it wasn't because of the wealth for me. It was because when I looked around the community, I was concerned about how the community was changing. I was concerned about how the community was, you know, excluding people who had been here since then. And so when I think about, you know, real estate, I got into it because I truly wanted the culture of our blocks and our neighborhoods to be seen by and with the people who have been here since forever. And so somehow all of those things combined, when I say like, how do I define how I want to spend the minutes of my life, is doing those things and enriching our community. And ironically, they align very clearly to the Black Panthers 10-point program that Huey Newton, and Bobby Seale wrote. And so I'm like, look at me, all revolutionary, and didn't even know I was. And so, you know, I'm proud of that, but also it's like, you can be proud of that, and you also can see it in writing, but that can be smoke and mirrors, right? Like, how do you apply that continuously? How do you put pressure on you, right? Because there's no competition out here. We don't compete against each other. You're my sister, you're my brother. But, you know, how do you continue to hold me accountable to like, okay, so Whit, I see that's in your Instagram profile, but, you know, I ain't seen you speaking on it enough. Like, I haven't seen you, and us being willing to take that feedback and take our God-given gifts and be out there every single day trying to promote, again, our brand as people who are about improving the community. So, you know, that is what that means. And, you know, you have seen, I could speak more to how I have done that in the past, but there's still so much to do. You know, I want to make Huey Newton and Bobby Seale proud and the rest of the Black Panthers, but you know, I don't want to be performative in it. I want to make sure that I'm doing this, that it's led with heart and not just per se, you know, something that looks cute on the gram.
Yeah. And I can say for one, like, you are definitely walking the talk, because even every time you like post on Instagram, particularly around a new project that you're working on, you are always like Black folk, we can do this, we can build wealth. And it always encourages me, because I know that's the pathway that I'm trying to take. And I know, like, I'm like, dang, I wish I had 2 hours with her. I have more questions, but I definitely want to unpack and respond to a lot of what you said, because I saw a lot of my journey like parallel to yours. Like, even from what you said earlier in your first response, when you were describing who you are, and you like, there's so much that like we're connected to, and we don't even like we mimic or we pick up the behavior of others who we've never met, right? Like, I don't know if this has been your testimony, but this fight, like this energy I've had around social justice, particularly for Black folk, it's been there all along. Like, no one really like explicitly instilled that in me. I just remember like being young and watching Roots and was pissed off. Like, I may not have had the language around oppression and institutionalized, you know, slavery, but I knew that it was wrong, and I knew that it wasn't like, I just knew that it wasn't right for my people, right? And it just made me angry at a very young age, and I knew that I wanted to do something about it. I remember at like 8 years old doing a Black History Month project on Thurgood Marshall. And even though I didn't fully understood what it meant to be on a Supreme Court, I knew, I was like, well, clearly him being in this role made an impact that shifted the landscape of education in this country. Now, clearly I wasn't talking like that at 8, but I knew the gist of it. And I remember I was like, well, I'm going to go to Harvard too, and I'm going to become a Supreme Court justice too. And, you know, and I'm going to free my people. And this is like at 8 years old, but even to this day, I'm like, who, like, where did this come from? Like, why? And even when you're talking about Huey and Bobby, I see a lot of like what I fight for is the same things that they laid out in the 10-point program. Like, I was a young teacher too, and I built the curriculum around the Black Panther Party, right? And doing things like the first week of school where they want us to do these get to know you activities with our kids. I had my kids building business plans. I'm like, all right, so what is your favorite hobby? Like, what is something, if you weren't in school, that you'd be doing it all day? And kids were like, oh, doing hair, doing makeup, playing baseball, doing this. And I'm like, all right, but you know, there's kids y'all age, 11 years old, 12 years old, already like making 6-figure profits off of things that they just find enjoyable. I'm like, y'all can start now. So I started agitating them and stirring their imagination around ownership and building wealth and not being an employee or working for someone. Like, and that's nothing wrong with that, but at least have something to their name. And, you know, most of my boys, like, when we ask them what they want to be when they grow up, it was either a football player or a basketball player, just an athlete. And, you know, I was like, you know, I'm not that good at sports, but I am a little bit good at math. I said, so how much you think an average player make on that team? And they'll give me a number. How many players are on that team? I said, okay, imagine how much that owner is making of that team. They're making money off that team. Yeah, the team, the franchise, the ticket sales, all of that. I was like, why be a player where you can be an owner? And so even them thinking like, like no one's speaking that language to them. So I just look, this is gonna be a good conversation. Like I said, yeah, and I was a young teacher too, 22, and like I said, no one really instilled that in me, but it has always manifested in my work. And even now, and I know we're going to talk a lot about wealth, and I want to transition into that. I feel like for me personally, and I want to get your thoughts, I realized my roadblock to building wealth is I've been in survival mode like my entire life. So even when I do get it, it's like I want to hoard it, and I'm, you know, fearful of like falling back into debt or not being able to take care of myself. And I think like that's a lot of fear many Black folk have, or they're just in survival mode. So I just want to know, like, how would you define wealth, and what has been some of your obstacles along this journey, whether it was mental or financial? What was it like for you?
Yeah, that's loaded. I think, wealth to me is so conceptual because I think it's so beautiful that it can be defined in a lot of different ways. But I think our go-to is often monetary value, right? When we think of wealth, we think about, the collection of money, to your point. I think about wealth as like this infinite possibility of freedom. And I really want to emphasize freedom because I am in about 2 months about to walk away from a 6-figure job. It is risky at a time like this in a pandemic where a lot of people just don't have, and like also the future is very uncertain for a lot of people. But it also is me betting on myself, right? Like really thinking through how I said this before, how I want to spend the minutes of my days. And so I think about someone like you, and I think about so many other like sisters that I have, where you go out there, you have this idea, you have this concept, it is very core and central to who you are, and you want to share that ministry with the world. That's wealth to me, to be able to do something you love that is unbound by needing to clock in with someone, that is unbound by needing to, or feeling disrupted every single day when you're done and it's the end and you're just like, oh my God, I don't have time for the things that I know empower me, like working out, eating right, doing all of these things, like, that's wealth. And so when I think about the possibilities of it, I get so giddy because it's just like, yeah, like I'm walking away from 6 figures, but at the end of the day, I'm about to be wealthy as hell in 10 months because how much or in 2 months, because how much I can do in 10 minutes for myself is way more than I'm doing for, an organization that I love. But I think about all that I have to offer the world. And when I get done with work every single day, I am exhausted and I am tired. I love showing up for my community in that way. I love showing up for families and children in that way. But at the end of the day, again, going back to my personal ministry, there's so much more that I have to offer. So again, how I define wealth is really about having the freedom to live life your way, like holding the reins to it, knowing that you can maximize all it is that you have to offer in a certain time frame. Now, I will not say that, or I will not discount that a part of wealth is financial too, though. So there's time wealth, and that's mostly what I've been describing, having the time to live life the way that you want. There are some people who do that in Black and brown communities all over the world who do not have the salary that I have, or not even, the passive income that I have. And they are so wealthy. Yeah. Not rich, but they are so wealthy. They live life, they're happy, it's on their own terms, they're making the difference that they want, and it's absent of the money, and that's because they have the time freedom. So that is a form of wealth. But the financial wealth is more relevant in an American context because we're a society that really thinks about capitalism a lot. We are a capitalist society. In order to get ahead, we often center money in the way that we do things. And so I want to put that in context to, what I aspire for, our Caribbean sisters and brothers, our African sisters and brothers, and like everybody in between amongst the diaspora. I think about them and I say, man, I aspire for that lifestyle. But here I am, a Black woman in America, and I know in order to get that, there are some things that I have to give up. And so freedom essentially is wealth to me. And it's great that we can define it in, ways that matter to us. But I feel like the proof points that I've seen over and over again that truly define what wealth is always about that time freedom.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good. And I love that you detach wealth from just capital, right? Money. And being aware, like, yeah, an aspect of like, we do need money it gets back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? In order for me to have a full life, I need to have my basic, I need to have shelter, I need to have food, a place of belonging and community. And in some regard, it does take finances to do that, but it's just having that time. And that's honestly the season I've been in these past 2 months. So I had to bet on myself too. I took a risk. At my previous job, I was technically a temporary employee, but they kept renewing my contract. and I maxed out the amount of times that they could renew it. And so really wasn't that they didn't want to keep me around. It was policy. And when it was my time, like towards the end, I was just like going through it and I was trying to soldier through, but I couldn't do it. So I wind up like, you know what, I'm gonna bow out with grace now because I know how I want to honor my professional integrity. Like, girl, it got to the point I was so checked out. The only professional thing I was doing was my timesheet. And and I'm like, no, I know what I like. I bring 110% to the table, and this is not me. So I left prematurely, like a month or so before my contract ended. And I made a vow to myself. I'm like, I know that I'm not above any honest work, but it took me a long damn time for me to get to a place where I have ownership over my talent and my gifts, and I know what I bring to the table. And I'm not going to settle for any and everything just because somebody wants me there or it pays well. Because right before I left, I had this epiphany. I'm like, I can't give someone my best years and my best ideas only for me to get retirement off of it. Like, that's not enough for me. I'm like, not to get all morbid, but I'm like, if I were to drop dead right now, I'm like, the only thing my family is going to get is a check to put me in the ground. And that's not enough. And that's not wealth for me. And so during this hiatus, during this season of just pause, it was very uncomfortable at times because I'm so used to grinding. I'm so used to being at work mode and producing for other people. But to have this concentrated time where I could focus on my gifts and my talents and just seeing how when I channel that energy into my own space and singing it, my vision finally starting to come into fruition, and now people can see it more crystallized. I'm like, oh, this is what I'm aspiring to. Like, this is what I'm trying to achieve. So I definitely can relate with your definition, and I want more Black people or just people of color to look at it in that regard, because baby, you can have all the money in the world and still be trapped here. Like, I think about my father, he's been in survival mode his entire life. And for most of it, he didn't have to. Like, I was privileged to grow up in a household where we didn't have to worry about bills not being paid, or if the rent was going to be paid, or food was going to be in the pantry, but yet he treated it as if, we were allowed down to our last dime, and he missed, I didn't have enriched experiences growing up. We didn't go on vacations. We didn't travel or do anything like that because it was so focused on survival. And I see now, I'm trying to come out of that. And so, yeah.
Speak on that for a minute, because there's so much convergence there in our stories. And when I speak to you and when I speak to some of my other friends too, there's so much similarities in what we learn and what we glean from our parents. Where when I think about Gen Z, is it a little bit underneath us, and how they just don't take no ish from nobody. No. And there's something as annoying as they can be sometimes, there's something incredibly inspiring about that. Because the way that you speak about your dad, what I learned about wealth was through my mom too, and my experience growing up in her household. And so my mother, at the end of this year, will be the longest employee at her hospital. She is basically almost like a secretary. She works in medical records. She's been there it will be 49 years. Wow. 49 years at the same employer. My mom makes $11.15. Wow. $11.15. It is not a livable wage. It was never a livable wage, but in the way that you said with your father, she made it work. I knew every Monday we were going to have rice and beans. I knew every Tuesday we were going to have pork and beans. I knew every Wednesday we were going to have spaghetti. And, you make those meals stretch. And I saw her make a way out of no way all of the time. But my mom's understanding of wealth was, when I get my paycheck, I spend the very minimal to help my family survive, and I put the rest away, to the point where she's up for retirement. And when I was at home with her for these past couple of months, she was showing me some of her documentation. I'm just like, Mama, you have like over 6 figures saved. Like, this is incredible. This is amazing.
Yeah.
But then I would think about it and say, damn, like if you invested this, like think about the snowball, right?
Yes.
Like had you invested this money, this would have been 5 times as much,
yes,
mama. Like had
you
or like had you known what I know now to like flip your community, buy up the block and have people, you know, giving you money. I just think about that and I say, you know, I was really saddened by it. And I said, that's such a miss. And when I think about, you know, people like you and people like me, that is the concept that we grew to understand money. You hoard it, you put it away. You don't splurge on nice things for you because I mean, it's almost like it was not said, but it's like, you're not worthy of it because you haven't gotten to that place yet where, you know, you can buy nice, expensive things and like, you know, do nice things, get facials and things for yourself. And so I love that we're a generation who challenges that because there used to be a generation where you didn't challenge your parents and where you did not provide the alternative experience. I tell my mama all the time, you wrong, Pooh. Like, no, like there's a different way of thinking about it. And she gets mad. And I couldn't do that as a child, but as an adult who knows better now, it's my responsibility to show her a different way. And, you know, in the same way that I do with my friends and other people who I meet. So that just spoke to me because it is a consistent thread with people our age where our understanding of wealth was forged by our families. And sometimes most unfortunately, what we learned through them were not the best of practices.
Yeah. I mean, girl, you said a mouthful. I really do feel like our actions are a response to what we were fed growing up. I mean, it's the same. Like my dad, he just retired like less than a month ago. And when I tell you the only reason why he was working, it wasn't because he had to. It was because that's what they were taught. At 60, you retire. So it was, I'm 60 now it's time to retire. When the house was paid off for over a decade, he owns all the cars, like no major debt at all. And he was in the military, so he's gonna get a check from them for the rest of his life. And it's the same thing, like he hoarded all this money. And when I started to learn more about like investing and flipping, I'm like, dude, like we could have property in our name and your grandchildren, like they could be set up. Like when I tell you my motivation, like my new mantra now is my children are going to be born free by any means necessary. Like my children are not going to have to decide between pursuing their passion or survival. They're going to be born with something. Yeah, they're going to be born with something in their name, right? And I'm also going to teach, especially my girls, if God see fit for me to have them, like, this is a liability. This is an asset. This is how, you know, you build a great credit line. Because, girl, no, I had to learn the very hard way about just money management and all of that. So, I'm like, I want to maximize my time with you because we don't got much left. So, yeah, I would say, like, what agitated you to, you know, start pursuing real estate? Like, what do you remember that moment? Like, you know, I think it's something I want to do.
Yeah, so it was very accidental. I had a property and I bought this property when I was 24 in Central City. I'm Central City. That's where I'm at right now. I love the Blackness, the culture, the realness, the grittiness of Central City. I can't see myself living anywhere else. But I bought this house and what happened? I went to grad school and I said, I want to consider selling this. And so I contacted a real estate agent, and the real estate agent showed me the value of that house just 8 years later. And I couldn't believe it. I absolutely could not believe it. And I said, you know what? So I had done a lot of things right, which I want to be sure to share really quickly. I'm such a firm believer that Black people need to really embrace communal living. I told my students when I was teaching all the time, y'all so in a rush to be grown, but sweetie, let me tell you the benefit of living with 5 people, 4 people, 6 people. Save your money, and the world in you are going to be an adult in is going to be so different, so much more expensive. So if I never taught you anything, let me teach you this. Getting your bag is essential, but be smart about how you are getting it. And so when you are splitting bills and doing this and doing that, it is just, it's great. It's great, right? So I did that. When I was, when I bought my first house, you know, my roommates, we would split the rent and it would go to me, right? A portion of it would go to the mortgage, but I could save the rest of it. When roommates went out, I remember the first year Airbnb was a thing. It might have not been the first thing, but it was like, I don't know, it may have been in Airbnb's third year, something like that. And this is why having a network is so important. Jen Medberry and Trey Medberry, who founded Kickboard, who we use all of the time across education in New Orleans, they were talking at a Christmas party that we were invited to about like, yeah, like Airbnb is this new thing, yada, yada, yada. And I was really curious about it, but I didn't insert myself into the conversation. I looked it up and I said, wow, I have all these extra bedrooms. I can rent these out. I can get money. You know, I'm kind of opposed to the whole house Airbnbs, but if people want to come live with you and like you share your experience of, you know, your community, your neighborhood and things like that, I would be more than happy to share my house with people. I've been doing this my entire life. And so that was then a form of income. And so I had actually paid my house off by year 6 through that income. And it was such a fast bag that it was unreal. But when I saw that I could flip that bag 4 times over because of how that first property had increased in value, it was a no-brainer to me. So I sold it, I pocketed that money. And when I said, you know what, this is such a beautiful thing. But then I thought about all of the people who were coming to the open house. They were people who did not look like me. And I was just like, ain't no way I'm about to do this block. Like, first of all, I want this woman. This woman is not offering me what I think this house should be for, but that's the family who's about to get this house, hands down. So leaving money on the table to ensure that we were good, people like we were good, who deserved to be in that community was important to me. But it sparked my interest and it said, you know what? Okay, not only did I flip this bag 4 times over, not only did I get to put a Black family in a home, in a community and neighborhood that I love, damn, what if I did that like 4, 5, 6 more times, especially in some of these neighborhoods like Treme, Central City, Gentilly, who are, you know, at risk of a lot of gentrification. Like Bywater is already there. So I said, let me look around. Like I got money now, like let me look around. And I actually didn't go the traditional route where it's like, let me go on Zillow, let me go on realtor.com and see what's for sale. I went like bootstrap with it. I went to the neighborhoods. I was looking around, you know, I already have friends in these communities, you know, I'm on the porch, I'm talking to people, I'm getting to know them. And they're just like, you know, my mama, like she getting ready, you know, she's getting ready to like move to this community and things of that sort. Well, what is she getting ready to do to her house? Because I know what's going to happen to it if it's not in the right hands. And so, you know, I would go out and I would put myself out there to say that I am not an investor, because I don't really like that word because it has such a negative connotation when we think about housing. But I say, you know what, I'm someone who's passionate about preserving our community cultures and our community norms. And so if you want to get some help and, you know, or you have an offer that you think is the right offer, I can perhaps match that. And I can assure you that when I get done renovating the house, beautifying it and getting it back to something that you and your family will be proud of, I will make sure that it goes to another person of color. So I did that 1 time and then twice. And then before you know it, I'm just like, damn, I low-key made a career. Didn't mean to, but it was very accidental at source. But I love doing it because I know how expensive rent can be, and home ownership is such a beautiful thing. It comes with its own expenses, right? But to know that something is yours was an experience, again, that I didn't have growing up because I was so transient and bouncing from home to home. So I want that ability and that stability for our kids, for their families. And so it's no greater joy than I have than putting Black people into homes that can eventually become their forever homes.
Yeah, that is so dope that, you know, not only are you focused on building wealth for you personally, but you're also paying it forward and creating opportunities for Black families to do the same and develop that sense of security. I think that's dope. Like, are there moments, because we are human, where you are faced with that, not dilemma, but like, if there's a situation where you may have a white family or a family that's not of color who are offering what is worth it even more. But, but your mission is to provide this opportunity for, a family of color. Were there ever moments where you be like, ooh, I want to take this bag? And if so, like, what pulled you back? Like, okay, but this is what I'm more focused on.
That's a great question. I think the more we know ourselves, the questions of like leaving money on the table just simply float away. Like, I'm not hurt by leaving $2,000, $15,000 on the table. You know who is hurt? My real estate agents. I feel so bad for them because I'm like, oh, your commission ain't what you thought it was gonna be. I'm so sorry, but I know how important because I always sell homes to families who have children. It's not something that I'm just like, that's a non-negotiable, but somehow it always works out that way. And I see myself as that kid, like, who was just like, you're about to get your own room. Like, you're about to get your own, your own space, your privacy. And that means way more to me than the $20,000 that a white person would have said, you know what, I want this so badly. I want this so desperately. So at the end of the day, I'm just like, nah, because I see myself in these families, there's nothing that outvalues that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think like what probably helps you is your own concept and definition of wealth. And it's not directly tied to just money and capital gains. So that is so dope. How would you, even though you fell into it by accident, I'm pretty sure you learned a lot. And I know there's an art and science to it. There's no like one straight shot way. But how would you advise, particularly Black women who want to embark on a similar journey of pursuing real estate? How would you advise them on beginning the process?
Yeah, so here's what's important first. I think we have to like define what our goals are when we say we want to get into real estate, because it's open game out here. Like it's for the taking, honestly. So I would say, like, first think through, what are your goals in wanting to do this? Are your goals wealth? Because I think that gives you a totally different pathway. Is your goal similar to mine, where you truly don't want your neighborhood gentrified and you want houses to go to families and people who, will continue to preserve those community and like neighborhood traditions and things of that sort? There's many other pathways to it, but I would say like starting by assessing, what is my why? And I think pairing that with, when you think about what home ownership does for a person, like think about one of the last families that I sold a house to. I was telling them, your kids right now are really small, but in 10 years from now, 15 years from now, they'll be ready for college. They'll be ready for, adulthood and things like that. Did you know you literally can take out equity in your house to fund their education? Like, loans, I don't know the future of loans. Like, they are so hard to get right now. The interest rates are insane. I advise against them as much as possible, especially the education loans, what I'm referring to. But when you think about, having the equity in your home after 15 years, to be able to take that money out and fund a new business for your child, or to fund real estate for your child when they become an adult, or fund their college education, or like whatever certifications and skill sets that they need. It is such a freeing experience that so many of us did not have growing up. So again, evaluate it and think about the why, and then think about the long term too. Like, what am I doing this for long term? And what are the time frames and the boundaries? Am I doing this for 5 years? Am I doing this for 10 years? How does it match and align with, my why and my purpose? I then think, to start, this is most essential. All of my friends ask me, like, how do you start? You gotta have a bag to start. Now, so you can do the wholesaling route. So you can get a list of homes and you can acquire them for like little to nothing. And then you basically, wholesaling is basically cold calling people and saying like, hey, do you know the value of your house? I can help you get the value of your house and more. And so you basically are a broker and you get something off the top when that house sells. It's a good way to get started in real estate, but it's little bits of money and currency at a time. When you go into real estate investment, that is a long-term game. And that just means that to buy your first property, I would say, I was looking at Zillow yesterday. There are some properties in Holly Grove right now that the starting rate is like $50,000. Some people are just like, dang, how do I get $50,000? You don't need the whole 50. You just need the down payment. 20% of 50 is attainable for some people as a down payment. If you were doing FHA, you can get, 3%, 3.5% down, I think, something like that. So that is, little to nothing for some people too. But when I say you got to get the bag first, there are some people who don't yet fundamentally understand the idea of saving. Yeah. And like literally the communal living, like you need income other than your job, other than your 9 to 5. When you get the bag, and I was fortunate because, I got a national teaching award 10, 15 years ago that gave me $25,000. I have friends who have 3 bedrooms and one of the bedrooms is paying for the rent, and then they're collecting the money for the other 2. I have friends who sell lip gloss. I have friends who, friends who are exploring so many different ways to make money. However you do it, get the bag, put the rubber band around it and say, this is my investment bag right here. Yeah. Then you find the property that matches what you have saved and that is aligned to your goals. And then you go forward. You find that real estate agent, you get that property, you negotiate that property. Just because the asking price is $50,000, you don't have to go to the table saying, this is what I'm offering. Lowball until, like, you'd be surprised. There are people who I have gone to the table and I have said, you know what, here's where I'm starting. They didn't even counter me. So it's like, you never know how low, all they can do is counter you. And if you accept the counter, great. And if the counter falls somewhere between where you had hoped to be paying for in the first place, you got a discount. Yeah. So, it doesn't hurt to try. So I would say, get aligned to a real estate agent who is a shark right along with you. Delisha Boyd, I go to bat for her and her team of real estate agents because this is a Black woman leading one of the top firms in Louisiana, and she is awesome and she is wonderful. And she has been, my go-to, her agency for all of my properties. But be aligned to a real estate agent who knows how to speak for you, who speaks your language when they're at the negotiation table with the other real estate agent. Because real estate agents, the selling agent or the listing agent doesn't really hear from little old me. So I need somebody who represents me in the way that I want my voice to be heard. So, be aligned with the right real estate agents. And here's the beauty. Once you make the sale, the buy, and you renovate it, chances are when you look across property values in New Orleans, that $50,000 investment, if you poured another 20 into it, now this is where the bag comes in, because you don't have to put a lot of money down for the down payment, but you got to have the money to renovate it. And so you now have saved that up. You have gone into it, you poured into it, you got to get aligned with the right contractors. And so, you just got to know people. And that's why I say when people start these ventures, it's not good enough for you to just have the knowledge or to, feel like you got to figure it out. You also got to have a team out there. You got to have a plumber. You got to have the person. And when you don't have those people, you got to learn it. And so sweat equity worked in my favor. I learned how to lay floors. I learned how to do drywall. It was a hot mess, my first flip. But you know what? They bought it. And at the end of the day, it passed the inspection. And so we got to learn how to do all the positions of the business and of our brand. You got to play all the parts until you know how to finesse it and get other people to do it in the way and with the integrity that you would have done it in. So at the end of the day, when you're done with that first flip, you spent $50,000 on the property. You may have put another, $30,000 into it. $80,000 is what you're minus now. But imagine selling in Holly Grove for $250,000.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of it. And then you do it again. You get the bag, you flip it. You get the black bag, you flip it over and over and over again. And that is how you build your wealth. People sometimes are afraid. I encourage people, don't be afraid. I did not know what I was doing the first time I did it. It's like I said, like, had you seen the paint that I did that first house on, you would be like, girl, this is a damn shame. And I'm like, you know what? That's okay. I'm gonna buy another quart and I'm gonna do it again until somebody say it looks good. And when it looked good enough, I'm selling it.
Yeah. Oh my God. So for one, there's a lot that you said that, like, I tell you, it's like warm tea. It's just like got me feeling all comfort inside. But because recently I've been reflecting on, I saw this meme like a while ago, probably a couple of years ago, and I'm paraphrasing. It said, a lot of y'all want to ascend before mastering how to ground. And that really stuck to me. And even now, like on this journey, it's starting to become more clear as to the sentiment of that message. And I think that's what you're talking about. Like before you talk about getting money and being rich and flipping and having securing all these bags, one, you need to be grounded in what's your why, right? Like I could tell you the technicalities and some steps that I took, but if you're not grounded in your why, when those storms come, you're gonna be flailing, like flailing in the wind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's
gonna be all right.
Yeah. And so I think that it's important to emphasize, and I'm glad that you didn't like do, okay, well, this is the first step, and then you do this, and then you do that. Like, it's not black or white. It's really just like, what is your why? What is your reasoning for doing this? If it's just to get rich, if it's just to get money, like, you need to go back and do your homework, because you might find yourself in situations where you're making bad deals or you're getting duped because you didn't do the homework, right? You were so focused on ascending or getting to that next level of being in the room of Whitney's, like, oh, but she got it, I'm trying to be where she at. So I'm just gonna do exactly what she did. But no, you ain't pay attention to what sis did. Like, she took time. Like like your work is informed by who you are and your own life's journey. Like, I thought it was so beautiful. And I felt that when you talked about selling a house to a Black family and seeing that child and seeing yourself in that child, like, you're going to have your own room. I know how important it is, just like that part of a human development to have a space to just have your own, where you can retreat, right? And just process and think, and where you feel safe. Like, that's a huge part in just our quality of life. So I thought that was dope. And then take time to stack up your own money. If you don't know how to have a sense of ownership of your own shit, but for real, like, you're not gonna know how to handle it when it does come. So I thank you for that, because I think it needs to be said a lot more, because even with starting my own business, I took, like, I mentioned before, we started this conversation, for 6 months, I didn't even know that's what I was doing, was starting my own business. I was just doing something. I saw that I was creating something that Black women were responding to. And I knew that it was something beyond just my own my own self-gratification, right? I knew that I was giving a service, but I had to ground myself in, like, what is this thing? I had to be in a meditative state around it. And even before I went public and announcement, like, oh, I'm launching my own business, I took another 4 to 6 months to just sit and, like, what's going to be my mission? What's going to be my vision? What are my values? And, like, what informs this? Like, Blackbird, I named it after Nina Simone's song, Blackbird. And what she was talking about in that song, and how this grief that Black folk felt and still continue to feel, like, why even dare to dream of a better life when we know it's so much stacked against us to even achieve that? And I wanted to flip that narrative by creating a space like this. That's my why. And when you talked about aligning yourself with the right team, we both share a sister friend, Crystal. I'm like, I reached out to her and I'm like, okay, I need your help. I need you to help me, like, map this out and help me think this through. And she was very instrumental. I call her my midwife into birthing this baby. So yeah, I think those are, like, key steps or just principles to go by. It's like, one, just spend, and it is a concentrated time, and and it's not going to stop. There's this continuous journey of going back to your why, right? And sometimes your why may evolve from where it first began, because at first I thought I just want to do these intimate support communities where I create this confidential space for Black women to come talk. And even from May, when I launched it, now it evolved into something even way beyond my imagination. And I'm glad that I'm still taking the time to ground myself and build the foundation, because when it does take off, I want to be prepared for that. And I want to be in a position to where I can pay it forward. So thank you for that. And I feel like I'm processing out loud just because you said be aware. and like I said, I feel like a lot of Black women need that as well. It's like, girl, take your time. I know it feels like we don't have it, but no, it's necessary for you to do that. So I always ask this question towards the end of all of my conversations. Like I mentioned, I named my organization after Nina Simone's song Blackbird. And I like to ask women, like, you know, why, when she said, you know, why you want to fly Blackbird in her song, it was more so like I said earlier, talking to the grief that we felt as Black folks. Like, why do you even want to dream about freedom when you know it's not stacked in the cards for many of us to have it? But I want to change the energy around that. So now I'm asking, like, why do you want to fly Blackbird? Why is your liberation so necessary? So I want to end us with that question.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I think because I'm left with no choice. There's no choice but for us to fly. I think about our ancestors. Oh my God, clipped wings, so many opportunities that were not afforded to them. There's so many, all of the no's and like just like all of the, you said it best, like the grief, the pain, the anguish. I don't think that they imagined that, okay, like here's my, I'm thinking through my ancestral line and like, look at little old Whit in 2021. Damn, she's still struggling. Like, imagine all of your ancestors, like going back to the very first one, and they just like, bro, it's been centuries. And like, look, people still out here struggling. So I say, I'm left with no choice but to fly. And when I think about that, that's so empowering and it's so beautiful too. But it's also a challenge as well to really think through, in what ways do I do that? Like, in like, what is essentially our purpose for being here on life and in life? And it goes back to, you know, really antagonizing our why. I love how you just said that, how it wasn't clear. I think sometimes everything that comes to us is so muddled. It's so like it's not like this. It's not linear. It's very much a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and even still creating the space to reflect on it and still ask the questions that get us to a much more clearer picture and crystallizing the word that you said. I think it's just like such the importance of meditating, such the importance of sitting in silence, such the importance of not being, you know, almost controlled like by a motor sometimes when we're just like in these jobs and it's just like, okay, every day is the same. Alarm goes off, boom, get dressed, boom, catch the train, boom, get to work, clock in, boom, do my work, clock out, boom. And it's just like every day can't be the same. Somebody within our lineage has to break that pathway. And I'm so glad that, you know, I can't speak for your family, but I see you doing that. For me, I can totally see my family when I think about my mother, excuse me, and my father. I'm definitely doing that. I'm not, and you know, to these Gen Zers, I'm just like, you know, Gen Z, Gen Yers, yes. And I'm glad that you're the generation under us because they not taking no shit. They not in jobs. They not even in jobs for 2 years. They just like, oh, that don't work for me. So like, I'm flying. And, you know, I love it because we're exploring newness within ourselves. I always say, what, 13 million Black people in America. We are a small population of people who you can fit in the state of Maine. Can you imagine how lit it would be if all of us were there flourishing, building our community together? That's just such a utopia to me because everybody around the world, when I think about Korea, when I think about even what's happening in Nigeria, like even though those are our origins, right? Everybody capitalizes off of Black American culture. Everybody is trying to look like us, sound like us. And it's just like, it's amazing. I want for us to see the benefits and to reap the benefits of something that was born out of a lot of oppression, but it's so essentially and uniquely us. All of us deserve to fly. It's just a matter of going back to something we said earlier. You got to believe that you should in the first place. And if you don't believe that you should, then you can't. And you won't. So I've been believing. My mama was enough example for me to know I didn't want to live my life that way. So I changed it at every front that I could.
Oof. I mean, that was such a beautiful way to end it off. And I think that is key, is like knowing that you're worthy of it. You know, Toni Morrison, she said it the best, and I'm paraphrasing because I know I want to butcher it, but she was like, you know, freeing yourself one thing, but like to take ownership of that freedom is a different thing. It's an entire different journey. And it's right. Like I feel like the place that I'm in now, I manifested since I was a little girl, but even when I got to this place, I still wasn't at ease. I still wasn't comfortable in it. I was still looking over my shoulder and had my head on a swivel and waiting for the other shoe to fall because I was in survival mode. But it really got down to, I didn't think I was worthy of what I manifested. So yeah, like that's a whole word. Is like, you have to, a part of the why is why, because I'm worthy of it. Damn it. Like, my ancestors did not bleed, suffer, and die. And even, no, all our ancestors were not suffering. Let's be clear. Okay, yeah. Like, they were free at one point. And, you know, that it's just that, like, our freedom is necessary. And I love people like me and you. Like, honestly, I saw no other choice. I knew like oppression was not the way, sis. I'm like, nah, this ain't it. I may not have the language around it at like 5 or 6, but I'm like, this ain't it.
I love that. I love your Thurgood Marshall reflection. It's just, again, you have manifested the life that you live now. And I think that when we impart that upon children, you know, we both were in the education game. When we impart that on children, showing them how to do that at a young age and telling them the importance of dreaming big, creates that they're now living. And so I think about the missed opportunities, but it encourages me to go back to, again, from your point, doing it to, you know, other women and showing them that this is such a valuable thing that you should be instilling within your child, because it matters when they're 20, it matters when they're 30, it matters when they're 35, you know, 36. And so help them understand that them visualizing their future is one of the most essential things that they can do, but not just visualizing it, literally being intentional about how they can manifest it and spread it and build it out. And so I love that, because it really is a full circle moment from what you know, how you opened about that experience to like, you are good, like you are the spirit of him, and freeing our people and allowing them to tell their stories in a way that, you know, truly this has been such a reflective experience for me in a way that I did not know that it would be. But it has really also challenged me to think through, yeah, with like the journey ain't over with. Like you gotta sojourn on, like you gotta go out there and you gotta continue to put your foot on the ground, even when it does not feel, you know, like you're making the impact that you want. You are changing not only your life, but somebody else's. And so in the way that he did, I see that in you too.
I appreciate that. And I receive that. And I wish the best for you. Continue to do dope shit, because we watching and we are learning and growing from you. You know, hopefully me gonna be toasting one day over a deal. I'm speaking that to existence.
I'm there for it.
All right, well, I'm gonna end it here.